When I was a fresh-faced 19-year-old about to head off to university, I didn't think that just a few years later I'd be inundated with content like this.
Let's talk about what higher education really is.
The American college system is broken. Costs are spiraling out of control and quality is declining, just as international students increase in demand and subsidize.
I am, like many other people, in a significant amount of debt. A large amount of debt that I collected for this right here. I want to spend a little bit of time reflecting on my own experience, but also answer some broader questions. I want to see why tides are changing, why people are increasingly against the idea of formal education, and explore a few ideas that you might not have considered when asking the question, is university still worth it? Okay, but first we need to go somewhere. Okay, so the building behind me is the creatively named British Library, and there's a good reason why I'm here. You see, this building behind me is an example of what's called a legal deposit library, which means that a copy of every book that's ever published in the UK is sent there. That includes thrillers such as How to Poo at Work, A Practical Guide to Racism, and even the classic banger, That's Not How You Wash a Squirrel. But that's not the point I want to make. You see, the very fact that this building here exists means that you or I, or anyone in the country, could learn anything they wanted to for free. And despite the fact that this building's been here since 1973, it hasn't put universities out of business. And so that leads me to think that there's a bit more to the story. And to fully understand what's going on, I think we need to go back a little bit. Okay, so we need to ask ourselves a different question first. Why do universities still exist? One of the most common criticisms levied against formal education goes along the lines of, why pay for something that you could learn for free? And to some extent, I agree. The fact that I've been able to make this video isn't anything I learned in a formal institution, but the full story has to be a little bit more complicated than that, because if access to information was the only reason universities were around, then the world would be a very different place. I don't think we would have such large numbers of people willing to put themselves in financial debt for something that is effectively free. And so I think this is a good opportunity for us to do a little bit more research. So I came across this research group called History and Policy, and they've published a few pretty interesting papers on this topic exactly. It's mainly focused on the British education system, but I think they have some important implications no matter where in the world you're from. And they've done a really good job at putting into perspective some ideas that I hadn't thought about at all. So let's have a shot at trying to summarize them. Our story could start as far back as the 9th century, when monks and nuns taught as part of their duties. But the modern university, which combines research and teaching, came along much later, largely thanks to a German philosopher named Wilhelm von Humboldt, who in the late 1700s was dedicated to changing education. Before Humboldt, the university was seen largely as a place for vocational training, that is, training lawyers, doctors and scholars. But Humboldt disagreed that this was the sole purpose of higher education. He said it should be for the cultivation of the mind and character, and to create well-informed human beings and citizens. After his success in implementing this model in Germany, much of the world followed suit, and the renewed reliance on scientific research in the First and Second World Wars made universities become an integral part of national identity. This is made really clear in this educational report from the 1960s, which states that universities had the following roles: the promotion of cultivated men and women, and to transmit a common culture and common standards of citizenship. But unfortunately, this didn't last in the UK. By the 1990s, universities became more and more expensive to maintain, and governments were more focused on cutting costs than anything else. Along with the US, there was a transition from viewing universities as a tool for self-actualization almost, as something that could have a wider social benefit, to the second view, the view of universities as a consumer service. And this came with a few different ramifications. It came with an increased pressure to be profitable, a rise in education fees, and the need for countries to compete globally in what's been called a kind of knowledge economy. To me, it appears we've reached a point where two different views have to coexist. The first one, which pitches university as something for self-actualization, and the second, which pitches it as a consumer service. And while inherently I want to say that it's a bad thing, I can't help but acknowledge the fact that I've directly benefited from this. My initial decision to go to university was purely because I knew it would allow me to take risks that I wouldn't be able to take otherwise. It would give me a sense of security and safety that is unparalleled. It was almost akin to a life insurance policy, rather than a decision to be based on my desire to become a more cultured or worldly person. I can't tell you if going to university is worth it or whether or not you should go. All I can say is that it has value for a lot of people beyond the pure economic value. And in a system that values it just as a service, something to be bought and sold, maybe it isn't worth it. But I can't put a value on my peers or the support network that I developed while there. I do think it's really easy to romanticize going solo at things. But the reality is the majority of young teenagers don't really have much experience in doing hard things alone. In an ideal world, I'd like to see a wider appreciation for education as a social benefit, in the same way that we view primary and secondary education. And I'd like to see people be able to access it more freely and more easily, and have to worry less about it as an economic decision, and more as a decision that relates to their passions and their interests. But maybe that's just a pipe dream. A big thank you to Justin, Khan, Sarah, Blueberry, Alfie, Michael and Stephen for helping to make this possible. Much love.